Here. Having a quorum, I will call to order the meeting of the Metropolitan Transportation Committee meeting for February 8th. Next, we are on to approval of the agenda. If there are no changes or additions to the agenda, we can proceed without a motion. Anyone have any changes or additions? All right, seeing none, we will move ahead to the next order of business, which is approval of the minutes from the January 25th meeting. Did anyone have any changes or additions to the minutes? All right, seeing and hearing none, I'd entertain a motion to approve the minutes.
Would make a motion to approve the minutes.
They're moved by Sterner. Is there a second?
Fredson seconds.
Seconded by Fredson. Is there any other discussion? Seeing and hearing none, Jenna, could you call the roll, please?
Chambliss?
Aye.
Fredson?
Aye.
Sterner?
Aye.
Zarin? Zarin? Oh,
Aye.
I see there. Barber?
Aye. With that, the minutes are approved. Next thing, we are on to our TAC report. We have Mr. Finley here. Welcome to the committee.
Good afternoon, Chair Barber and committee members. David Fenley, Chair of the Transportation Accessibility Advisory Committee. It's great to see you all again. Quick update. So TAC has been discussing and providing input to the Metropolitan Council and Metro Transit on Orange Line connecting routes. We're excited about building out the southern suburbs and South Minneapolis routes there. Network Next, as well as the statewide pedestrian system plan. And importantly, too, in our last meeting, we also finalized a letter which you all will be receiving, along with the council chair, that that expresses two motions that our committee members passed last year. The first one supporting increasing the amount of priority / accessible seating on fixed route buses, and then another related motion that supports an awareness campaign about the uses of the priority and accessible seating on fixed route buses. That is all I have for you, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Great, thank you, David. Any questions from council members? All right, I'm not seeing any. And then I would assume that if anyone has any questions for you or your committee, we should reach out to you once we get the information.
Yeah, Chair Barber, yes. And I will have that letter in your hands by the end of this week.
Okay, great. Thank you guys and the committee for the work on that. It's appreciated. So, all right. So if anyone does have questions, even follow-up questions, make sure to reach out to David. I'm sure he'll be more than happy to communicate back. All right, we're on to other reports. We have MTS Director Thompson.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
All right, COVID update. We are continuing to work with Metro Transit on coordination of the vaccine for public transit workers. Unfortunately, like 2 weeks ago, we still do not have any details on the timing of when vaccine will be available to them, but we continue to prepare to get ready. We have a vendor who will be providing the vaccine, and we should have that contract signed very soon. Good news on the positive testing rate. Last week, we only had one positive test among the contracted workers. This is down from 5 in the prior report and 9 in the report prior to that. So trending in the good direction on that. And to date, we've identified 129 contracted workers who have tested positive, or less than 1% of that workforce. We're going to be making some slow changes to our essential services that we've added to Metro Mobility and Transit Link. The demand is starting to grow from our regular riders on those services. Last week, Metro Mobility had the highest ridership levels among Metro Mobility riders since the beginning of the pandemic. So ridership is slowly coming back. And we've really continued to grow that essential healthcare worker trips. And we're at that point where we need to make some changes because of capacity on the system. So step one in this transition is we will be reintroducing transit fares for the essential health workers on using the Metro Mobility service on March 1st. So they will start to be paying the same fare as a Metro Mobility rider. We do believe that this will cause ridership of the healthcare workers to start to shift over to the fixed route system, or at least for the ridership to maybe level off from the steady growth we've been seeing. We have looked at all the trips that are made by healthcare workers on Metro Mobility. I believe many of them can now be accommodated on fixed route, which is a lower fare than the Metro Mobility fare. We also feel we can make this change now because all healthcare workers have been provided access to the vaccine, and they should be by March through their second dose and the 10 days after that. So we believe it's a good time to start to make this change for those workers and encourage them to look at the fixed route options that are available to them. And we'll continue to monitor if we need to make more adjustments as the Metro Mobility ridership in particular continues to grow. Lastly, legislative update. Council continues to make presentations at the House and Senate. Last week, Chair Zilli gave a presentation about MTS and Metro Transit operations and transportation planning to the Senate. Next week, the House Local Government Division will hear a presentation about the Governor's Blue Ribbon Committee on Council Governance. So as you recall, we reported to this committee on that through the fall. That Blue Ribbon Committee completed their work in December and submitted a report. And so the chair from Dakota County, Chair Holberg, who is the chair of that committee, will make a presentation on the findings at the House Local Government Committee next week. And that, Madam Chair, concludes my report. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Director Thompson. Any questions from council members? Councilmember Chambliss.
Thank you for that report, Mr. Thompson. I know this part of the Blue Ribbon Committee question is not necessarily related to transportation, but I'm very curious about what the response is going to be related to having the majority of the panel selecting council members be local representatives or mayors. It seems like that is kind of politicizing the selection process more. So I would like to inquire, and maybe that would be with the chair on, how we can provide some feedback on the response regarding the composition of the interviewers.
Sure. Madam Chair and Council Member, yes, I will. We'll monitor. I don't believe the council will be presenting at the hearing, but I think we can monitor questions that are asked and then provide follow up to that question, and then I'm sure we have a say. With this report was provided to the governor as recommendations, and obviously our chair and council members have a say in that recommendation also. It was definitely a split conversation about that recommendation. I think many of the committee members found that the last process, the process that all of you went through at the beginning of this governor's term, had made some changes from before that seemed to work pretty well in terms of representation.
Yeah, I would definitely agree. Thank you.
All right, additional questions or comments? All right, I had one question, Nick. How are we communicating out the change for essential workers so that they're prepared for it and have their enough time to make sure that they're planning how they're going to switch over to regular route service?
That's a great question. We will we have a couple of avenues. We have direct communication with each of the those that have been using the service, and then we will communicate as they're booking it that the change is coming. And then as we set up this service, the local health providers, healthcare facilities, were really instrumental in getting the word out for us about this trip and this service, and we plan to re-engage them and have them help communicate this change, and then point them back to Metro Transit and our other regional providers of how they can find about what transit services are available to them. So I think we have a pretty robust communication plan that will start this week.
Very good, thank you. All right, if there's no other questions, we'll turn it over to General Manager Koistra. Thank you, Nick.
Thanks, Chair Barber. Can you hear me?
I can.
Okay, Chair Barber and council members, I'll start with the COVID update. We've had a total of 362 employees diagnosed with COVID from March 2020 through yesterday. This figure includes 3 new cases since the committee has met on January 25, and each of the new cases is at a different work location. So, we've seen a dramatic drop in the number of new cases as has the state. We've had a total of 20 cases in January. We put those 20 cases for the entire month of January, and to put those in context, in December 2020 we had 60 cases. In November we had 120 cases. Metro Transit bus and rail services are not experiencing any service impacts due to COVID leave, given the small number of cases that we have. You also may have heard that the CDC issued a federal mandate on mask uses that went into effect essentially on Tuesday, February 2nd. For our customers, not much has changed. We've had a mask requirement since May of 2020, and the governor's executive order reinforced that requirement effective July of 2020. This new law applies to all transit systems in the United States and is aimed at setting uniform expectations for all travelers, regardless of local and state laws, rules, or suggestions. The federal law does require the agency to deny boarding and to remove passengers who fail to comply, which has not been the primary approach of Metro Transit. So bus operators have been provided a step-by-step bulletin for how to address this new requirement, with instructions to contact the control center if someone is not in compliance. This is so the operator can avoid conflict directly with the customer. Operators will continue to bring masks from a supply that is available to them at each of the garages for customers who do not have one. Transit police have the enforcement responsibility for monitoring compliance on light rail and transit stations. The marketing and communications team updated our website and social media channels before the new mandate went into place. We also sent out a ride alert to all subscribers notifying them that wearing masks is now a federal requirement. We'll continue to use existing signage on the bus and the overhead destination sign that have said facial coverings required for months now, but we created new visuals for the LRT and BRT station digital message boards. Additionally, we recorded a new on-vehicle message to clarify that wearing masks is required by federal law, and the message is being uploaded across the system now. I believe Director Thompson already mentioned that we're still waiting on the word from the vaccines. In terms of ridership, ridership remains down 62% system-wide, and for weeks of January 25 through January 31, bus is down 61%, Blue Line is down 65%, Green Line is down 61%, and North Star is down 96%. So that's the completion of my report.
Thank you, General Manager. Other questions from council members? I just had a comment. I'm glad to hear that you have a plan in place of how to help our operators interact with people who are trying to board who aren't complying with the federal mask mandate. But that was the question that I had, so I'm really glad that you guys are ahead of it. And I'd like to hear in the future maybe how that's going.
Yeah, Madam Chair, I'd add that I think Brian Funk is involved on a committee that is looking at that and suggesting some language change to the CDC that instead of mandating operators to not allow doing the best effort
Mhm.
at compliance, so that there's not an expectation that operators do more than they can do, and in an effort in our interest of protecting our operators, not creating those kinds of conflicts that really are not good for any interest.
Yes, very much, very good. And just of course we want everyone who is boarding and riding in our system to use face coverings, but we do want to avoid conflict with between the drivers and our operators and our riders. So, all right, any additional questions or comments from council members?
Chair Barber, I just had one comment or question, but I'm wondering about the North Star line, and as you through your reports been aware, it's been down so far with 96%, 97% down. Um, as the COVID gets vaccination, things like that, what do you see will bring it back, or will it come back to its original form? Are there other ideas for marketing or extension of line or services offered that we can increase the ridership on that line?
Sure, Madam Chair and Councilmember Sterner, that's a really good question. We're looking at all our express service and commuter express service in the same way. I think that our bus commuter express services, like North Star, which is essentially a commuter express service, are down between 90 and 95%, and so we're talking with downtowns and so forth about what the businesses are seeing as a return to work. I know that Council Member Cummings had sent me information from a Boston Chamber of Commerce who expected about half their workers to return, but on more on different schedules, like a Tuesday, Thursday, and a Monday, Wednesday, Friday schedule. So we don't believe in. The short answer is we don't believe that the commuter express service is going to rebound nearly to the extent of the local services, and I think that we're already a reduced service in the North Star area from 72 trips to 20 trips, and I think we're just going to have to watch and stay in communication with businesses to better understand what the impact's going to be, and then adjust our schedules accordingly.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Madam Chair. Madam Chair.
Sorry, Councilmember Zarin.
Thank you. I would just like to interject and make a prediction. The North Star line will come back when the Twins start winning baseball games and people want to go and sit and watch the Twins jack homers and strike people out and get up and do the seventh inning stretch. That's when the North Star is going to come back, when baseball comes back. That's what I got.
Thank you. All right, anything else? All right, thank you, Wes. Now we're on to our business. We have no items on consent tonight. Our first item of business is business item 2021-42, which is our 2021 work plan. And turn it back over to Director Thompson and General Manager Koistra.
Madam Chair, General Manager and I presented this 2 weeks ago as an information item and asked for feedback in the MTS. We did not receive any feedback for changes, though, of course, as the year changes, we can always add items to this work plan as things change, or there's information items that you like to hear that were not on the list. So no changes from MTS from what we presented 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, Madam Chair, I'd only repeat what Nick said in terms of if there are areas that are on the list that you'd like to hear more about, we would love to be responsive to that, because we want to provide information that you're interested in. So that sort of feedback all along the way is welcome.
Councilmember Chambliss.
Director Thompson, do you know if there were items that were on previous work plans that are not on the current work plan? It's kind of nice to see the comparison. So especially if we're looking at what we want to have added, and consider whether or not anything needs to be added back.
Sure, Madam Chair and Council Member. couple of changes that MTS did this year. In the past years, we had added our entire work plan, which included every item that our planning and contracted services was working on, not necessarily every item that would come before the committee. And so we reduced the number of items to just items we felt would come before the committee for information or major actions. But so there are some changes in that sense. The other thing we added this year, I added what we thought were external presentations that we've brought before the committee occasionally, but we thought we wanted to get this more ingrained in the annual work plan. So this is MnDOT making presentations on major projects, suburban transit providers, having them regularly be on the work plan each year now, I think is a good addition to that. And then we thought we'd add the Center for Transportation Studies from a research perspective as a standing item going forward. And so those are some areas of change. But I think the biggest changes is we removed some of the, what I'd say were more routine actions or routine work. We tried to capture all the major studies and major information items this year.
Okay, thank you.
All right, any additional questions or comments from council members? And I will just note that obviously as things change, even as we did this year, our agendas change. So if you do have ideas or things that you want us to bring up, please either send them to myself or Director Thompson or General Manager Koistra. So seeing no other questions or discussions at this time, I'd entertain a motion to approve business item 2021-42.
Fredson, I'll move approval.
Moved by Fredson. Is there a second?
Second by Sterner.
Seconded by Sterner. Is there any other discussion? Seeing none, Jenna, could you call the roll, please?
Chambliss,
Aye.
Fredson,
Aye.
Gonzalez,
Aye.
Sterner,
Aye.
Zarin, I can see you saying aye over there, and Barber.
Aye. There you go. I got it. With that, the motion carries. Next, we're on to business item number 2021-39, which is a joint committee item. It's a February budget amendment. And we have Ed Petrie, Heather Augustin-Huber, and Stuart McMullen here. We have a short presentation. I think I'm turning it over to Ed.
Good afternoon, Chair, committee members. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Great. Yeah, as you mentioned, Chair, we just have a couple slides here. We just want to kind of set the stage here with the February budget amendment and talk about the Federal CARES Act and the CRISA funds. A lot of what is impacting the budget amendment this evening is the result of the federal funding that we received, the stimulus funding. Next slide. So first of all, the original CARES Act money that we received back last year, it was called CARES, Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security Act. I think the council is very familiar with this. It was signed into law back in March 27th of 2020. And then we approved with the FTA, we applied for a grant and it was finally approved on May 29th of 2020 for about $226.5 million. The original CARES Act allocation strategy with these funds was this initial allocation was based on our estimated lost fare revenue and also lost MVES revenues. And the ultimate goal of the CARES money was to balance us in calendar year 20 and 21. That would include bus, light rail, commuter rail, metro mobility, contracted services. And so that was our ultimate goal. The current status of this funds as of 12/31/2020 is one of the things that we did as of 12/31/2020 is we did have a balance of funds left within the original CARES Act funding. And so we, for most of our operations for the bus, metro mobility, contracted services, we pulled a large portion of those CARES Act monies in as of 12/31/2020. We had eligible expenses both in Metropolitan Transportation Services and with Metro Transit. So we pulled those funds in and put them then into our fund balances as of 12/31/2020. So what will happen is it'll actually be when we close the books in 2020, it'll actually go down into our reserves. Originally, when the council adopted our budget back in December of 2020 for the 2021 budget, we had a planned use of CARES Act money in 2021 on both, for example, Metro Mobility, Metro Transit bus services. So part of our amendment this evening is removing those CARES Act funds out of the 2021 budget and replacing it back with the use of reserves because we've pulled the money in earlier. So that is part of what is going to be happening, or our recommendation for our budget amendment this evening. The next slide. So then we always call this CARES Act number 2. It's called CRISA funding. This is the second stimulus funding that the council or the nation did receive on federal funding. It is called Coronavirus Response and Relief Supplemental Appropriations Act. This money generally follows the same rules that the CARES Act money did. It will be administered through the FTA following the 5307 formula programs. The CRISA money was signed into law on December 27th, 2020. We do anticipate we will be applying for our regional grant around the March-April timeline. We're still waiting for FTA to finalize what the requirements are of the grant and how we apply for them. But once it is finalized, we have our draft grant in the FTA system as we speak today. But we're waiting for the FTA to give us the signal that all parameters are set. That grant will be for approximately $185.9 million. And it's a regional grant for our transportation region. As of this point in time, we have not finalized and have not set the regional allocations across our region. But once that grant is finalized and applied for and finalized, we will then develop the regional allocations across our region. The Metropolitan Council, for its share of the funds that we will get out of the $185 million, we have developed what we look at as our allocation strategy for these CRISA funds. First of all, we're looking at providing relief to both state and local governments in the state fiscal year 22 and 23 bienniums. 22 and 23 years. What we mean by that is the fact is that right now we have anticipated shortfalls both in Metro Mobility and rail operations. So the Metro Mobility would be for the state, rail operations of both state and the local counties. So our plan would be to use an allocation strategy that we can provide the relief, use the CRISA funds to balance both Metro Mobility and rail operations through state fiscal years 22 and 23. We then also have, as we've been talking about, we have a support transit safety initiative, and that we've been talking with the legislature about, we've talked to the council about. This would be our administrative citations, police presence, and real-time video. So our plan would be to use the CRISA funds to then support that initiative for state fiscal years 22 and 23. And then the other thing is, the other big piece would be this additional funding will then allow us to fund a share of our unfunded transit capital maintenance deficit. Over the last few years, we've been talking with the committee and with the council every year when we adopt our 6-year CIP that we have enough money to fund our current preservation of our system and a part of our long-term deferred maintenance in our system. But we've also been talking about that we've had a number of maintenance needs, for example, on the rail side, that we did not have enough money to fund, for example, like the last 2 to 3 years of that program. With the availability of the CRISA funds, that will allow us then to fund a share of our unfunded transit capital maintenance deficit requirements that I will then go into when we get into the amendment. So at this point in time, those are the 2 slides that kind of give you the groundwork for both the CARES and the CRISA funds, which will then follow into the budget amendment. And Chair, I would be willing to answer any questions or move right into the amendment.
I think we should pause and see if there's any questions. So thank you. Ed, any questions from council members on that? Because it does help to frame up the budget amendment.
Yes.
Okay, looks like we're good.
Okay.
Go ahead and get.
And Chair and committee members, as Heather and I proceed through the amendment, if you have any questions, just please ask. So I will move forward with the business item 2020-39 JT. And also this evening, we do have a number of project managers with us. As we're going through the amendment, if there's any questions on any of the respective projects, I would have somebody available that can answer. But our proposed amendment this evening is that the Metropolitan Council authorize the 2021 unified budget as indicated in the accordance with the attached tables. I will go through the Metro Transit portion first, Chair. That will go through the Metro Transit capital and through the operating, and then Heather will go through the MTS, Metropolitan Transportation Services operating portion. First of all, on the administrative side, we have just one adjustment that we talked to the FTA about. It is an administrative adjustment between the new Minneapolis bus garage and the renewable energy initiatives. We had originally had it in the renewable initiative program. We classified it into the Minneapolis bus garage. After consultation with the FTA, they want us to reclassify it back into the renewable energy initiatives. We'll be able to still support the same program, the same project, but they want us to reclass it back into the original project in line with the scope of the grant. It doesn't change any of the funds. It doesn't remove any funds. It's just an administrative adjustment only. The largest portion of our amendment this evening on the capital side is the authorizing new projects or increasing authorization and reducing authorization. It is a project called Bus and Rail Capital Maintenance Requirements. As I just discussed in the presentation, the availability of the CRISA funds will allow us to fund a share of our unfunded transit capital maintenance projects. This amendment will provide $94.25 million in motor vehicle sales tax funds for bus and rail capital maintenance requirements. They will allow us to maintain our bus and rail vehicles and support facilities in a state of good repair, based on a condition asset assessment that we performed as a result of our condition as asset and reporting to the FTA. I think, as you recall, back in 2018, we had to file an asset management report with the FTA, in which we have to update on an annualized basis. As part of that, we then do an annualized condition assessment of our assets, rank them on a scale of 1 to 5, 1 being in very good shape, 5 needing a lot of work, and we've done that condition assessment across our assets. So this was a large part of the basis of the bus and rail projects that we're recommending this evening. As we've discussed in the previous presentations to the council, these projects, they've been deferred due to the absence of a funding source. This budget amendment does demonstrate our commitment towards asset preservation by assessing the future needs and responsible planning and management of our asset resources in accordance with the asset management plan of the FTA. One of the things that we worked with Wes and senior management, we worked with our bus and rail operations, and we identified the most critical state of good repair projects and are recommending them for moving forward this evening. This additional amount of funding should be able to provide the cash flow and allow these projects to move up and over the next couple of years. The immediate cash flow funding to the capital maintenance requirements allows these projects to be completed earlier, maintain the assets in a state of good repair, which will in turn contribute towards the economic recovery in our region. Our budget amendment does provide funding towards the deferred maintenance, but will also provide us an opportunity for contracting with disadvantaged businesses, and also will provide ADA improvements to both our customers and support facilities. On the listing of the projects, you will note on the bus maintenance or bus capital maintenance requirements, we've identified about 8 or 10 projects totaling just over $19.155 million on the bus side. This is after consultation with our general manager and our bus system, identifying the most important projects that are of a critical nature. They include security and safety camera preservation projects, real-time sign repairs, bus repair capital maintenance, a number of HVAC and electrical system repairs and improvements, some safety camera system replacements, ADA improvements to both our support and customer facilities, and some Haywood office building system replacements that include both heating and HVAC. Those will total just over $19.1 million. On the rail side, we have a number of, I believe it's 6 different projects that are with the rail capital maintenance requirements. They include Blue Line state of good repairs called Phase 3. This will deal with obsolete signal equipment, some stray current issues we have. So with a number of phases of repairs on the rail side. We have some special track work replacement, A number of roof replacements, for example, at the O&M facility, a green line axle counter replacement, and some variable message sign replacements. In total, the rail projects are just nearly $75.1 million. So the total of the bus and the rail capital maintenance requirements are $94,250,000. And Madam Chair, I would stop right there. And if anybody has any questions on the capital portion and on any of those projects, myself or we do have people available on the call that could answer.
Sure. Councilmember Fredson.
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick question related to that Haywood office building system replacement. Is that the old building or is that work that's being done in the new building?
Chair, committee members, that is our current Haywood facility that was built, I believe it was in either 1983 or 1985. So it's our current Haywood facility.
Okay. Additional questions? Councilmember Chambliss.
Yeah, the 94 million designated towards deferred maintenance, which includes contracting for disadvantaged businesses. Is there anything new with the contracting for disadvantaged businesses, and what type of support is that? Is that folded into everything that's on the line item, or how does that work?
Madam Chair, committee members, that would be available for any one of these projects when they go up for bid.
Okay.
So any one of these projects would be available.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. Additional questions? All right, Ed, go ahead with the operations.
Then I will then go to the operating side of our budget. For Metro Transit, it's an overall change in revenues. It's a decrease in revenues of just over $132 million, an increase in expenses of $1.9 million, and use of reserves of just over $134 million. The operating amendment does include 5 different changes. I'll go through those one at a time. The first amendment is reducing the CARES funds in the bus budget by $39.8 million. As I had mentioned earlier with my presentation, when the council originally adopted the Metro Transit bus operations budget, we had planned a use of CARES money in 2021 of $39.8 million. As I stated, we actually pulled those CARES funds in as of 12/31/2020. They went down into our bus operations reserves. So then we will then plan to use those reserves then in 2021. So it's a dollar for dollar exchange between CARES funds and reserves. It's still using the same dollars, but it's just replacing it now with the use of reserves. The second item is the motor vehicle sales tax transfer of $94.25 million. As I mentioned during my presentation and during the capital side of the presentation, we'll be moving down $94.25 million worth of MVES funds down into the capital budget for the capital maintenance projects. We then on the third one is we were the lucky recipients of a $49,331 2021 Pathway to Policing reimbursement grant. This is a federal grant. Every year we try to apply for special police grants that will help us with our policing efforts, safety, security, etc. We were the lucky recipients of a grant that will allow us to supplement the salary and training of 2 community service officers. This is a $49,000 federal grant that does not require a local match. So we were very happy to receive that. The fourth item is we do have, we're recognizing a pass-through of federal funds from the council, passing it through to Ramsey County. With this, the council is actually, it is a federal grant for Ramsey County, but the council has to apply for the grant, receive the federal funds, and then we then pass it on to Ramsey County. So it'll be in and out in our operations. The final item is with the Metro Transit Service Development Department. They had 2 contracts that the council had approved back in 2020. One was for a Title VI Service Analysis Master Contract, and one was for a Scheduling Support Master Contract. Both of these contracts have balances left that they will then finish out in calendar year 2021. The Title VI contract has a balance of $154,702. So we will bring that forward and they will expend it in calendar 21. And our scheduling support master contract has a balance of approximately $17,000. We will then bring that forward and expend that in calendar year 2021. So with that, Madam Chair, committee members, that is the Metro Transit portion of the operating budget. And I would stand for any questions.
Thank you, Ed. Are there any questions from council members? All right, seeing none, we'll move on to Heather for the MTS part of this.
Good afternoon, Chair, Council members. My name is Heather Augustin-Huebner. I'm the Director of Finance and Administration for MTS. Very similar to MTS or to Metro Transit, MTS is making changes to our operating budget. In Transit Link and Fixed Route, we're basically doing the exact same thing Metro Transit is, where we spent our CARES Act money and are drawing it in 2020, and we're replacing it in with reserves. So what that means is you're going to see a dollar for dollar change of just over $2.5 million in Transit Link and just over $1.6 million in Fixed Route. In Metro Mobility, we're doing that same dollar for dollar reduction of CARES and increasing use of reserves. Plus, we are programming an additional $1.7 million of CARES funds that were previously unprogrammed. The proposed amendment programs available federal, state, and regional funds to the unified budget to allow the council to carry out its work plan and its long-term capital program. The MTS section is really short for this evening, so I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Good, thank you. All right, any questions from council members? All right, seeing no other questions or discussion, I'd entertain a motion to approve business item 2021-39JT.
Motion to approve by Chambliss.
Moved by Chambliss, is there a second?
Second by Gonzalez.
Seconded by Gonzalez, is there any other discussion? All right, seeing and hearing none, Jenna, would you call the roll, please?
Chambliss,
Aye.
Fredson,
Aye.
Gonzalez,
Aye.
Sterner,
Aye.
Zirin,
Aye.
Barber.
Aye. With that, the motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks to Ed and Heather and everybody else who hopped on the call in case we had questions. Much appreciated. Next, we are on to business item number 2021-36, the same week item. It's the D-Line construction contract authorization. I believe, I'm not sure if we have Shaheen or Katie Roth here to present.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and committee members. I will present this business item. I'd like to start out by highlighting that business item 2021-36 being requested for council action pertains to the D-Line major construction contract, and it's an important milestone for the D-Line BRT project. This is the first of the 3 BRT contract award requests that we will bring before the council in the coming weeks, with the other 2 pertaining to the BRT shelter and pylon fabrication contracts. Our request today on business item 2021-36 would authorize the regional administrator to award and execute contract 20P279 with Thomas & Sons Construction, Inc. for the construction of the Metro D-Line BRT project at a cost not to exceed $26,142,556. The D-Line BRT project construction occurs at 30 intersections along the project corridor from Mall of America to the Brooklyn Center Transit Center. Through this contract, the project will construct 40 new BRT stations, the corridor-wide fiber communication infrastructure, and also the locally requested pedestrian and signal improvements along the corridor, developed in coordination and partnership with Hennepin County and the cities of Minneapolis and Bloomington. The construction IFB was advertised on December 3rd of 2020, and bid opening was held on January 7th of 2021. We received 3 bids, and Thomas & Sons Construction Incorporated was selected as the low bidder. Upon review by OEO and procurement, Thomas & Sons Construction was the lowest responsive and responsible bidder and is being recommended for award. Furthermore, OEO determined that Thomas & Sons passed the DBE evaluation by meeting the goal of 15% set by OEO for this contract. Lastly, of the total contract price, roughly $21 million is being funded by the D-Line BRT, and the remainder is through cooperative agreements with Hennepin County, Minneapolis, and Bloomington, executed by past council actions. Again, the proposed action in business item 2021-36 would allow for the award and execution of contract 20P279 with Thomas & Sons Construction for the construction of the D-Line BRT project in the amount of $26,142,556. And with that, Madam Chair, I'd be happy to answer any questions on this business item.
Thank you very much. Very exciting stuff. Are there any questions or comments from council members? So my only question is, so when would the D-Line at this point, would you say, what's the anticipated in-service date?
Service date is currently planned for December of 2022.
Oh, that's very happy sounds. That makes me happy. So it's very exciting to see these projects moving forward. So, all right, any other questions or comments?
Chair Barber, I'd like to make a
Councilmember Chandler.
motion.
Oh, of course.
I'd like to make a motion to approve.
Is there a second?
This is Fredson. I'll second.
Seconded by Fredson. Is there any other discussion? All right, seeing and hearing none. Jenna, could you call the roll, please?
Chambliss,
Aye.
Fredson,
Aye.
Gonzalez,
Aye.
Sterner,
Aye.
Siren,
Aye.
and Barber.
Aye. With that, the motion carries. Thank you, Shaheen, Katie, your whole teams. Thank you so much. All right.
Thank you.
All right, so that concludes our business for the evening. So for what goes to the full council, number one, that just stays within the Transportation Committee because that's our own work plan. But both items, 2 being the budget and 3 being a same week item and being such a big step for the D-Line should go non-consent to the council if everyone agrees. All right. Then we're on to transit. Our information item is Transit Information Technologies Update.
Yes, good afternoon, Chair Barber and members of the Transportation Committee. I'm Bruce Hunt, Director of Marketing and Transit Information. And along with me, and I'm going to be introducing Ben Rakowski. Ben's our Manager of Transit Information Department. So with our presentation this afternoon, we wanted to share with you some general background about the Transit Information Department, how we provide transit information, how customers' expectations are changing, and how we provide that information and how we are changing to meet those expectations. And we're going to touch on some of the technology innovations that we've brought online recently, which is pretty neat. And we'll take a look at some of the exciting things that we have coming up. So as I mentioned, Ben is our manager of transit, the Transit Information Department. And he'll be making the presentation today. Ben's been with Transit Information for several years. He started out as a rep in our Transit Information Center. He was a supervisor, assistant manager, and he was promoted to manager of the department last summer. He's doing a great job for us. So with that, I will turn it over to Ben.
All right, thank you, Bruce. Chair Barber and council members, I appreciate the opportunity to present today. My name is Ben Rakowski. I'm the manager of Transit Information, and I'll be walking through a little background in our Transit Information Department and our work meeting changing customer needs and expectations. Next slide. So I think the last Transportation Committee meeting, you were updated on some changes that we had to the hours of operation to our Transit Information Center at Metro Transit. So this is a really great opportunity for us to provide a little more context to those changes that went into effect this last weekend, as well as providing some background on our mission, the current initiatives that we have that are really focused on meeting kind of customer needs today and into the future. And then we'll turn just a little bit to our future projects and initiatives. Next slide. So our Transit Information Department, our mission is to promote ridership by translating complex transit data into accurate customer-friendly information. And so we do that by really aligning all of our work to there's 5 main pillars of our customer information vision at Metro Transit, and that is that Metro Transit provides accurate, customer-friendly, accessible, professional, and robust information for our customers. So regardless of the project that we're working on, we're really focused on making sure that we're aligning with those pillars, and we're making sure that all our information is accurate and available for our customers. Next slide. So historically, in the Transit Information Department was really focused around our Transit Information Center. So our call center was a primary way that customers got information, and we had some ancillary pieces that supported other kind of roles within the department. But over the last 5 years or so, we've really tried to create a department structure to support 3 main areas of focus. So the first is our Transit Information Center operations, and that oversees our contact center, which is the call center and the texting service that we have, along with our IVR, which is our integrated voice response system that allows people to call in and get information, next trip information, go-to card information, etc. We oversee our data quality and our customer information proofing. So all the printed materials that go out with transit information are proofed by our department. And we oversee data quality from our schedule information, whether it's the weekly changes that come through or the pick or quarter pick changes that come through. We're overseeing all that data and making sure it's accurate. And then we oversee the online trip planner and online schedules that our customers use. Our transit information field operations work area is really focused on the signage you see out on the street. So they oversee all the bus stop signage that we have at over 12,000 bus stops, our schedule information that are over close to 1,300 shelters and facilities in our system, our real-time signs and annunciators that are up at over 200 locations throughout the system, and then all our printed material distribution, including pocket schedules. And then the final area is our projects and technology group that oversees our real-time tools and systems, our improved detour communication projects, a number of projects geared around improving the information we get to customers about detours and disruptions, our general transit feed specification or GTFS feeds. So these feeds are sort of the industry standard for transmitting transit information in a standardized form. It's adopted by a lot of different transit agencies and, more importantly, a lot of third parties that utilize this data. So our department oversees the availability, the accuracy, and the enhancement of the GTFS static and real-time feeds, and I'll reference those a few times, so I just wanted to give a little explanation. And then finally, they oversee our accessibility and equity initiatives around customer information. Next slide. Here's just a look at transit information by the numbers, and there's a lot of data here, so I won't walk through it all, but I think the main takeaway is that Transit Information Department supports a lot of different ways for customers to get information. On the top left table, you can see a number of different customer information tools and the usage over the past year. These numbers have declined a bit last year with COVID, but still there's a huge amount of usage through the various tools that we support in transit information. And the table on the right just walks through some of the other areas that customers get information that we support, like our pocket schedules. Our schedule displays that I mentioned are up at 1,200 locations, where 65% of our boardings happen. Over 12,000 bus stops have been updated with transit information, and over 200 real-time signs that we now support. So I think the main takeaway not only is that we support a lot of different tools for customers to get information, but we also touch every customer that rides our service in some way interacts with some piece of transit information that's out on the street. So we're really proud of that and really work hard to make sure that information is available and accurate. The bottom table, I think, is more germane to the discussion today. This just walks through the change in the way that customers have got information over the last 5 years, and we compared 2015 to 2019. And as you can see, kind of the top 3 customer information tools, the IVR, the Transit Information Center, and our trip planner are more of our traditional methods that customers use to get information. All of those saw pretty healthy declines over the last 5 years. At the same time, we saw increases in other ways customers were getting information, like our next trip, real-time departure information, either through the website or mobile app, our Show My Bus bus tracking tool that was introduced in 2016, rider alerts. There we go. Rider alerts that we send out for customers, our next trip via text request, and then the GTFS schedule downloads, which is the way third parties get our information. All those saw really healthy and somewhat significant increases over the last 5 years. So it's important to note here, we're seeing these changes in the way customers are getting information. It's not that customers are just decided they don't need information, they're just choosing to get it in different ways. Next slide. And so that really is what led to our decision to change our Transit Information Center hours, which again took effect this last Saturday. And the main takeaway here is that we are now closing on Sundays and holidays moving forward, and we'll close an hour earlier on weekdays. So we're open from 6:30 a.m. to 8 p.m. on weekdays. And as you can see, the graph on the upper left shows our call volume over the last decade. And you can see kind of a steady decline over the last 10 years, more precipitous decline in the last 5 years. At the same time, like we talked about, we have invested a lot of resources into new tools and ways of getting information. And so this is an opportunity for us to really effectively use our resources to support those tools and ensure that they're available and supported for customers. Next slide. So we have a number of initiatives really that we've been moving forward in the last couple of years that are focused on meeting the customer needs from not only today, but hopefully build into the future of where we see customer needs and expectations going. They fall into 3 main buckets around real-time information, information at our bus stops, and then the accessibility of our information. Next slide. So first we'll just walk through some improvements we've made to our real-time information. Next slide. The first major improvement we made was to implement a real-time prediction engine, which was implemented last summer. And this is software that uses smarter logic to really generate better predictions for our customers. And it does so by using additional inputs like recent traffic conditions. So we're learning from the conditions through a corridor. If there's been an accident or a demonstration and buses are delayed, the prediction engine is able to use those inputs to make better predictions to the subsequent buses that are coming after. And it also uses recent schedule performance to improve predictions. So it looks at how has this bus performed or the schedule performed over the course of the last week or 2 weeks, and there might be a detour that's causing a 5-minute delay in the schedule that we can actually learn and apply to our predictions to make better predictions for our customers. And so this is live and now implemented in anywhere customers are getting our real-time information through NextTrip or other systems that we support. But more importantly, the output of the prediction engine is the GTFS real-time feed, which is merged then with our alerts feed and made available to third parties like Google and Transit app, third parties that we know customers are using and use consistently. And now our information is available, our real-time information is available through those systems. So that's really exciting. Next slide. We also implemented a transit alert system last summer, which is a single point of entry that allows us to create detour and disruption messages and then push them out to multiple customer information channels. So we can create an alert, push it out to our website via email or text, via social media, through NextTrip. Like you can see the image here in the middle of the screen is a NextTrip result that actually shows now a canceled trip. So if a trip was canceled, a customer was outside waiting, if they looked at their phone, they could see that that trip is actually canceled and they can plan accordingly. It's also available now through our real-time signs at any of the LCD or TV style screens that you see on the BRT lines. That information shows up. So if a customer is out there, they can actually see if a bus is detoured or if a trip is canceled. So that's a really positive step forward. On the bottom left of the slide, you can see our new Metro Transit Alerts Twitter feed. And this is just an up-to-date feed of our detours and disruptions, which has come in really handy when there's multiple detours for a demonstration or for a protest, or just in general, if there's detours on the street, customers can look at our Twitter feed and find out what's happening. And on the bottom right of the screen, you'll see how our alert information looks through a third-party app. This is Transit app, and this is alert information for the Route 5. So if a customer was utilizing a trip with the Route 5, they're now able to see the alerts that apply. So both of those are big improvements to where we were just less than a year ago, and they're building blocks to the future on what we can do around alert information. Next slide. I had mentioned the Show My Bus and Train real-time bus and train tracking and mapping tool that we introduced in 2016. At the end of 2019, we made improvements to this service with the website redesign, and now this information is integrated within the next trip results. So a customer would get their next trip results and can click on Show My Bus to see where their vehicle is actually located, and they can see that vehicle moving in real time, which is really cool, and it's reassuring to the customer that, yeah, that bus is out there, it's coming, even though it may be delayed. We also integrated this information within our online schedule, so a customer can go to a route, look at the schedule, and then click on Show My Bus to see all the Route 5 buses that are out in service currently. Next slide. And then in summer of last year as well, we took over the support of our real-time signs and annunciators. So now the Transit Information Department supports and maintains over 200 real-time signs and annunciators. Previously, this work was kind of spread between multiple departments, and really we relied heavily on one of our ENF employees, Mark Lanthier, who had some background in real-time signs. He was kind of the lone wolf on the street who was sent out to fix a lot of these issues in addition to all his other responsibilities, which obviously not a sustainable way to maintain these signs. So now we have a team in place, 2 field techs and 2 dedicated IS positions. And we're really excited not only to get our system back up to the working condition where it should be, but also to really use the expertise of our field staff to help drive business decisions around the technology we use, hopefully employing technology that's more flexible, more adaptable, lower priced, and easier to maintain into the future. Next slide. Next area of focus was to improve information at our bus stops, and hopefully a lot of you are aware of the improvements we made, so I can kind of walk through this quickly, but I think it's really fun to take a look at where we were and see the improvements we've made, because it is quite noticeable. So here you have a look at our old style bus stop signs on the left before side of the slide. There really was no information for customers other than some bus might stop here, randomly placed on a pole. So on the right, you can see the new standard for our bus stop signs, which have route numbers, our stop number, information on how to contact Metro Transit and get real-time predictions. At higher ridership locations, we also include maps and frequency charts for our customers. And again, this is at all our 12,000 bus stops. In addition to this, we've actually customized our decals so we can provide more information if it's warranted at a stop. So if a stop's on detour or a closed or our bus is serving a stop temporarily, we have decals to reflect that, as well as reflecting if there's school trips, drop-off only trips, etc. So really providing more granular information for the customers at all our stops. Next slide. In the last couple of years, we've overhauled all the information at our shelters and facilities that schedule information. On the left, you can see the old style shelter signs, which involved a lot of printing, laminating, and taping, which did not promote consistency at all times and sometimes didn't look as professional as we'd probably hope. On the right, you can see some of the new templates that we have. We've been able to automate this process and not only provide more accurate, consistent information, but create templates for different lines so we can cater the information accordingly. So walking from left to right on that after image, you can see the BRT style schedule poster. In the middle is our Metro Transit standard schedule poster, and then on the right is our Nicollet Mall poster, all with stop level times, maps, and additional information as appropriate. Next slide. And then finally, we've improved information in our facilities. On the left, you can see some old gate signage at Sunray Transit Center. While it had the information there, it didn't look probably as professional as we'd hope. And on the right, you can see our new standard, which is to employ a bus stop sign with stop ID, gate information, and then the routes that service the stop. So we've updated information at all our transit centers. And so really just giving more information and a more professional look there. Next slide. And then the final bucket that I talked about for our current initiatives are really around improving accessibility of our information. Next slide. So we've brought forth a number of pilot projects over the last couple of years to improve the accessibility of our information. The first project here is our accessible map and wayfinding project. We worked with Ulta Design and along with the steering committee made up of TAC members, a couple customers, representatives of the cities of Minneapolis and St. Paul, and really put together draft wayfinding and map standards for our system, as well as developed a potential sign family of wayfinding signs that promote accessibility of information that we could deploy at different stop types through our system. The next step of this project is to pilot those sign types at different stop locations and then evaluate the overall impact and make recommendations on how we can scale those up. We have a couple locations selected based on customer complaints in the past, and we want to move forward with the pilot of implementing these signs this year and then make recommendations on how we can scale this up. Next slide. Another pilot we've been advancing is our Bluetooth beacon pilot. So this pilot was put on hold last year due to COVID, but we're hoping to ramp it back up this year. And the goal here is to pilot Bluetooth beacons to deliver wayfinding information to blind and low vision customers through their phones. Beacons can be placed anywhere kind of out in the field in kind of predefined areas, and then they can push out messages to customers to give them wayfinding information and guidance on how to kind of get to the next step of their journey. So we're looking at piloting these at 2 locations that have transfers between light rail and different modes of transit and provide information for blind and low vision customers on how to make that transfer between those services and modes of transit. Again, we'll evaluate the impact and the overall ability for us to scale this up and make recommendations accordingly. Next slide. And then the final pilot I want to talk about is the live stream wayfinding app. We put out an RFP last fall, and we're looking to move this forward this year. This provides the ability for customers to engage with an agent and use the camera on their phone to help to allow that agent to guide them from their location to either their destination or to another mode of transit, which is pretty exciting. It gives us the ability to have somebody who can actually see what the customer is seeing and guide them if there's potential construction impacts or detours to kind of walk through our system and navigate our system. So it's exciting potential there, and again, hoping to move that forward this year. Next slide. And so finally, just talk through where we see transit information efforts in the future. Next slide. We really have three focus areas: is to continue working with new and enhanced data, tools, and technology. And then probably most importantly is to build off what we've done so far, using the efforts and initiatives we've done as kind of a building block to the future, enhance the data and systems and processes, and then continue our work around the accessibility and equity of our information. And that will focus really on our ability to expand language options for our customers, expand some of our programs like our community partner real-time screens into more areas of our communities, and then doing an equity analysis on transit information tools and services to see how they're being used and ensure that we're dedicating our resources in an equitable way around customer information. And next slide. And that concludes my presentation. I will stand for questions. Thank you, Madam Chair and council members.
Absolutely. Thank you, Ben. Are there questions from council members? Councilmember Zarin.
Yes, thank you, Chair Barber. I just have a question. I'm not quite sure how to ask it, but you know, our expectations, my expectations for information has changed. I still personally like the personal touch to be able to call and talk to somebody. because I think that's important to have that human connection, especially when your technology, there's a little gap in your knowledge base and how to use the technology. It's great to be able to call and get that information. Reduced hours appropriately, I think that's really appropriate. But my question is around the data that's being collected and harvested by third-party apps. And is that information being turned around and being monetized by a third party? And is that something that we are opted in or opted out of? Or what's the Met Council role on that data and other people using it to monetize? Thank you.
Madam Chair, council member, I can let you know at least the data that we make available for transit information, and that's really public-facing schedule data that's available to kind of any third party or really anyone who wants to use that data. It's public-facing and there's no private data available. That's what's being used when I mentioned GTFS by third parties, and they're utilizing that through their tools. I couldn't speak or wouldn't be the right person to speak to how other apps are using other information or they're kind of monetizing that.
No, thank you.
Yep. Councilmember Chambliss.
Thanks. So for the reduction in the transit information center hours, I'm sure there's been, some cost savings to not have to have as many people on the phones. So it's probably more than just the hours, if you could speak to that. And I'd also like to, I'm assuming that the wait times on the phone have reduced as a benefit, if you could speak to that.
Sure, Madam Chair, council member. So 2 points. So we just did implement the changes this weekend, so don't have a lot of data to speak to about hold times, et cetera. To your first point about the kind of cost savings, our initial goal of making these hours reductions is to utilize the staff that we have to invest back in some of the other services that we're providing, not only through project support, additional training and opportunities that our supervisors now have more capacity to take on. So we have the same amount of staff and same amount of staff costs currently to operate the contact center, but we're utilizing those resources. Our goal is to utilize those resources to really help support a lot of these other tools now that we have implemented over the past 5 years. So this is, I think, really kind of an important first step. I think we're going to continue to evaluate how our customers looking to get information and utilize those resources that we have to make sure that they're supporting those different channels and systems that need the support.
Yeah, looking at that would make sense. I'm sure though, with the use of all the different technologies that happened before the hours changed, that must have had an impact on the call load. But anyway, so for the transit alerts in the wintertime, I think those alerts are even more important, especially when people are out there waiting in the cold. There were times in the winter where there was a problem with a bus just not working or somebody getting stuck in the snow. And, you'd sit there waiting, wondering when the bus was coming and wondering if when the bus does come and it's full with people standing, should you get on it or is there going to be another bus coming? Would customers be able to find out that, a couple extra buses were added? Or get information so they can decide whether or not to wait for the next bus or just hop on the bus and ride it for 30 minutes standing with people just kind of packed together.
Madam Chair, council member, great question. So you're 100% right. The alert system is I think just hugely important for people at all times, but especially in the winter and other situations where it's potentially dangerous to be outside. And if there's going to be an issue with service, being notified that that's happening, I think it's been a huge need for our customers. They can absolutely get those notifications now through whether they're subscribed for email or text alerts. Now that it's available through social media, through our Twitter feed, our alerts feed, which a lot of customers have been using and want to use to get information. And it's available through our next trip results, which is a big step forward. So there's the different ways customers are getting information. We try to integrate that information directly into their experience. So it's not just one way to get the information. We're also advancing a whole program of projects around improving detour and disruption communication. One element of it is what you mentioned about the ability to not only reflect services that are cut, but if we throw an extra bus out there, that we'd be able to reflect that. Currently, if it's not in the schedule information, that kind of baseline schedule information, we're not able to reflect it. But that is something that we're working on being able to do. And in the future, I believe we will be able to show that so that a customer can see exactly what's happening on the street. They don't have to guess or just hope and cross their fingers.
Excellent. Thank you.
Yep.
Councilmember Fredson.
Thanks, Chair. Just real quick, wanted to say thank you for your work on this. Of course, information matters, especially the real-time information. I think matters a lot. And I made the mistake. I like riding the A line so much. I made the mistake of letting the 84 go by, and then this was prior to a Minnesota United soccer game, and then the A line came, but it was full. So it went right on by. So whatever we can do to help customers kind of make the best decisions possible as far as which bus to get on is much appreciated. Thanks.
Thank you.
Councilmember Sterner.
Yes, thank you very much, Chair Barber. I just want to give kudos to you on the visibleness and the real professional look out, and the ones I think it really makes it more inviting to use transit, gives people the information there, and it's also uniformity really makes a big difference, so they know it's our transit system. But I thought that really was sharp, all the work you did on that, so thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair Barber, Council Member. I appreciate that. I agree. We've always talked about that being the gateway to our service, the front door of our service, and it really does make a difference to have that information and that professional look at every stop.
Great. Any additional questions or comments? All right, then I have a comment and a question. So this will echo some of what the council members before me have said, but I really love sort of the integrated look and feel. I love the fact that we're working at integrating with these other apps, because I do know, like, when I travel, it's those other apps that are sort of the instant go-tos because they're easy and you know them. So it's really helpful. And I really like that that was taken in the consideration for improving in the accessibility and ease of use. I think that's critical. Those are things that maybe in the past kept people from riding transit. So I'm very hopeful that this is something, as we start to ramp up back up here after COVID, it's just makes it a more inviting system for people to ride. So very, very, very good work. So my one question was, so we've got these different, where you're doing these pilots on these different like wayfinding systems, or I forget the other system you mentioned, but what's the plan and how you're going to get feedback and how those work? Are you surveying people that you know are out there, or how are you going to get that information?
Madam Chair, great question. So a couple different ways. We've had relationships with a number of organizations like Vision Loss Resource Center, State Services for the Blind. And so as part of our evaluation, I could start with the accessible maps and wayfinding. Part of it would be to get a dedicated user group that would be able to provide some experience and customer experience from using the system, as well as just general feedback from customers across the board, because the goal is really to design these as universally as possible so that it benefits all customers that go through an area, and then to really kind of get at whether or not the signage makes an improvement for a customer's ability to get, from their gate to the building or to their destination, or vice versa from a transfer point. around our beacon project, the Bluetooth beacon, there's actually will be a dedicated group of people who will not only help develop the content that will be placed in the beacons, but then also they'll go out with an orientation and mobility specialist to kind of walk through and utilize the system and the beacons to see if those beacons are providing the correct information and that it flows logically, because we don't want to introduce something that would confuse customers, and it's got to be accurate and it's got to be up to date. And so we want to make sure we do all our legwork before we're ready to say this is acceptable to move forward.
Very good. Thank you.
Yep.
All right. All right. Anything else from council members? Well, thank you, Ben, and thank you, Bruce. This is great work. So obviously the committee was very interested in it. So thank you for your good work.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, I do have one announcement to make. Nick had announced earlier that the Blue Ribbon Committee was being presented to the Local Government Committee next week. Councilmember Fredson noted that that date was changed, and so it's now been changed to February 10th at 8:30. So Wednesday morning at 8:30, if anyone's interested. All right, anyone have anything else? All right. If not, we can be adjourned. Everyone stay warm.
Thank you.